Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. This is Atul Krishna Das. I am your host for today, and today we continue with Karma Yoga. So, have you ever feel like in your day to day you have so many responsibilities, so many shiny things that are bothering your mind, or you feel like you have to juggle between responsibilities, and sometimes you feel like, am I making what I'm supposed to be doing right now? Have you ever felt guilt, shame, or like you're not doing your best and that brings you anxiety? If that ever happens, today is going to be a wonderful lesson because we're going to be using the wisdom of the Gita to understand how we can filter off that clutter from our minds and have a sense of purpose and direction. That every single day, everything that you do, you feel like you do because it's the right thing to do, that it has a purpose, and you feel invigorated and don't feel doubtful about what you're doing. And even though this is not a perfect world, so not everybody will feel at all times that everything goes according to plan, you feel that you're doing what you're supposed to and you can move through, which is the most important thing. And in order to learn all of these lessons, we're going to be hearing from the wonderful Simon Haas, who's going to be sharing the wisdom of the Gita with us. Hello, Simon.
Thank you so much, Atul Krishna Prabhu. It's great to be here on this show. So today we're at verse 41 of chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, and I want to welcome everyone who's watching, and also those of you who are not watching live but who will be watching this as a recording later. Thank you so much for joining this Bhagavad Gita study group. So as Atul Krishna was explaining, we'll be looking at Krishna's teachings on how to act skillfully. So this particular episode is entitled Karma Yoga, 3 Easy Steps to Train the Monkey Mind. So what is the monkey mind? What does the monkey mind say? And what does the monkey mind impel us to do? So it's helpful to think of this as the monkey mind is all of the ways in which we act unskillfully in our life. So ways in which we act against who we are, against our nature. We might feel, and this applies, this may apply to many of us in relation to our everyday work. We might feel dead, bored, alienated or disconnected, uninspired, exhausted. Alternatively, in what we do in everyday life, we might feel deeply attached. So deeply attached to outcomes, very controlling, always thinking about the future, anxious. We may act in a way we're not always present or attentive to what we're doing, or we don't experience peace and happiness in the present moment. We might be impelled by, we might not bring our higher self to what we do. And so these are these various unskillful ways in which we might act. We can think about that as coming about or originating from what we might call the monkey mind. So those of you who are watching from different parts of the world, I don't know if this is something that's universal. In England, most people hate their work. And their favorite day of the week is Friday. The day of the week that they least like is Monday morning. But we actually spend most of our life in some kind of work or occupation. And once you take away the time that we spend sleeping and kind of looking after the basics, a lot of the time, perhaps most of the time that we spend is in some form of work. So if we're not able to find deep fulfillment in what we do in our everyday work, we're actually setting ourselves up to be unhappy for the majority of our life. So Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita how to act skillfully, and he calls this karma yoga. And karma yoga relates to every aspect of our life, but it has a particular relevance also to our everyday work. And as we'll see, karma yoga has three easy steps. The first is be true to your nature. And we'll look at these in a moment. So the first is be true to your nature. The second is let go of the results. And the third is make your work an offering. So we'll take a look now at verse 41, which is where we're at in this study group. But before beginning, I would like to start with the traditional Mangala Charana, which is an auspicious invocation. He Shri Guru Jnana Dadina Bandho Svananda Dataha Karunaika Sindho Brindavanasi Nahitavatara Prasidha Radha Pranaya Prachara. So these auspicious invocations are ways of opening a circle of wisdom, and it's a traditional approach before opening a sacred, entering into a sacred text. So we're at verse 41, and we'll explore verse 41. But as we're right at the beginning of Krishna's teachings on karma yoga, the yoga of skillful action, we'll also be looking at an overview. So we'll be looking at these three steps of karma yoga. And that will really help in looking at the verses that follow in episodes to come, to be able to understand, like to have an overview of what Krishna is explaining. So Arjuna has fallen into a crisis in the middle of a battlefield. As you know, Arjuna says to Krishna he doesn't know anymore what to do. And he turns to Krishna for help and advice. And Krishna's first yoga teaching is you're not this physical body, and you're also not the lead character in your storyline. Krishna tells Arjuna that his biggest problem is that he's forgotten who he is. You see, if we don't know how, if we won't know how to act if we don't know who we are. So Krishna begins by sharing teachings from the Upanishads on the nature of the self. Now, Arjuna at this point, who's been listening attentively, he doesn't quite understand how Krishna's initial reply relates to his question on what he should do. So Krishna now begins to teach karma yoga, the yoga of skillful action. And this brings us to verse 41. Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahushakayanantascha buddhayo vyavasainam. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. I love Sanskrit. Sometimes if I notice something that is worth pointing out, so for those of you who are interested in the language, I sometimes point out one or two little details. So the translation says, O beloved child of the Kurus. So that is the term Kuru Nandana, which means O son of the Kurus. But Nand, the verbal root Nand, also means to rejoice or to delight. So that's why it's translated as O beloved child of the Kurus. Now, one commentator in our Bhakti tradition, Sri Baladev Vidyabhushan, he explains that in his explanation of this verse, he says that in this process of karma yoga, the yoga of skillful action, Resolute intelligence is fixed only on the Atma, the self. And the intelligence of those who are irresolute has infinite objects of desire with many branches. So I wanted to start with this because it really helps us understand the verse. Um, People often say that I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, right? You might have come across that. You may feel that way yourself, that what best describes you is that you're spiritual, but not necessarily religious. So that's a common way of looking at wisdom traditions. Now, in Sanskrit, the closest word to spirituality is Atma Gati, the journey of the soul. And of course, you may know Atma refers not only to the individual soul, but also to the Supreme Self, the soul of the universe. So, someone who's not on this journey, the journey of Atma Gati, the journey of the soul, their intelligence, their way of looking at life is many branched. So they'll be pulled in many directions. You see something that attracts your attention and you pursue that in life, and maybe that doesn't satisfy, but someone else that you know has done something different, and you see what they have, maybe a large house or an expensive car, and you think, well, if I get that, I'll find happiness, I'll find some fulfillment, and then we pursue that. And so our attention is pulled in different directions within the field of perception. It's not focused. But someone who's on the journey of the soul, someone um, who is on Atmagati, this journey of the self, their attention is one pointed, like an arrow. And so many things may happen in life, which we may think are, they may be thought of as being good or bad, or helpful or unhelpful, in everyday ways of thinking. Someone who's on this journey of the soul, they will see all of these things as helping them on their path, taking them forward on the journey of the soul. And their focus is singular or one pointed, whatever may happen on the field of perception. So this begins our journey, our exploration of karma yoga, the yoga of skillful action. Now, and we've spoken about this in previous episodes, Arjuna faced a dark night of the soul. And what he wants to do at this stage is to avoid action. And that's, of course, a common symptom of the dark night of the soul, the strong impulse to retreat from life. Now, Arjuna is a warrior. You can say a doer. But here he casts aside his bow, his instrument of action, and he wants to leave Kurukshetra, the field of action. So Krishna tells him, we cannot escape action, not even in the dark night. The real question becomes, what is the best way to act? How can we act with skill? And I want to invite you, not immediately during this episode, but perhaps at some point later today or tomorrow, when you have a peaceful moment, to take a look at the week that has unfolded so far. So take a look at last week and think to yourself, what are 5 skillful actions that you've taken, and what are 5 unskillful actions that you've taken over the past week? And these can be thoughts, like ways of thinking. These can be words, either to oneself or to others, or they can be deeds, things that we've physically done over the past week. So unskillful action might be acting against who we are as a person, against our values, and against our nature, our personality. It might be when we don't bring our very best self to what we do. So we approach life with frustration, anger, guilt, fear. So see if you can. I find this helpful. It's something that I personally like to do, to reflect over the week that has passed and consider the ways in which I've acted skillfully and unskillfully. You know, the ones that really stand out. You remember the argument that you've had with a close friend or a family member or your partner, and you just notice the unskillfulness in some of that, or perhaps the skillfulness in that situation. And then ask yourself, in what ways were those actions skillful, or in what ways were those actions unskillful? What is it about them? What is it about it that was skillful, and what is it about it that was unskillful? And then consider, this is the third part, consider, as a result of that skillful action or unskillful action, what did that lead to? There's one teaching in ancient India that the way that we approach something, uh, life mirrors that back to us. Or how to put this? Later, we'll have a look at the three gunas, the three qualities of this perceptual world: sattva, rajas, and tamas. These are three qualities that are quite different to each other, and they're always vying for dominance. When we approach life with one particular quality, then that quality is carried right through to the results, to the outcome that we experience. It tends to be that way. So we approach a conversation with, say, for example, frustration or anger, then that quality that we approach our communication with, that is then becomes the dominant quality, and it tends to be what we then receive back. The outcome reflects that quality as well. So see if you can identify outcomes from the skillful ways in which we've approached life and the unskillful ways that we've approached life over the past week. And that's a very helpful way of starting to approach the subject of karma yoga. And not just looking at Krishna's teachings theoretically, but really beginning to see how it relates to our everyday life and the way that we are thinking, speaking, and acting on the field of action, on Kurukshetra, the field of now. We're accustomed, maybe another way to look at this is we're accustomed to bringing our best self to our yoga mat. If you're a yoga practitioner and you go to a yoga studio or you practice at home, we tend to bring our best self there. But in our daily life, whether we're working at the office or preparing a meal at the end of the day, we might be distracted, inattentive, overcome by anxiety. So karma yoga is a way of acting skillfully, and there are three components. The first one is be true to your own nature. So living a life true to ourselves, that's a big topic. And we won't look at all of the elements of karma yoga entirely in this session, because there just won't be time for that. So we'll continue this in the next session that we look at, the next session. So on September 29th, we'll look at some of these three steps in even further detail. This is like, think of this as like an early introduction to provide an overview. So you may know of a palliative nurse named Bronnie Ware. So Bronnie Ware, she was looking after dying patients who were sure that it's just a matter of time before they leave this world, before they pass away. And she thought to herself, I won't simply care for these patients in the best way that I can. Maybe I can also learn something from them. So she began asking them questions. What in your life went really well? If you could start all over, what would you do? What, if anything, would you do differently? Do you have any regrets? And there was one regret that kept coming up again and again and again. What's the number one regret of dying patients? The number one regret is, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself rather than following the expectations of others, of everyone else. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself. So we are all not built in the same way. We have a unique nature, a unique personality, and the work uh, that best suits us, we will thrive in that. And there are other forms of work that are simply they're not connected. They're not in harmony with who we are as a person. Actually, that's one of the failings of our educational system in the West, I think, that it has a cookie cutter approach. We treat everyone in exactly the same way. But we're not all built in the same way. We each have a different set of gifts, you can say. So think of the animal world. Um, you have uh, you have bees, and a bee is very different to a hummingbird or a fish or a lotus. They each have their own particular qualities that you can say they're powers. They have different powers. A bee is able to turn pollen into honey or nectar. Um, a hummingbird is able to fly, to remain in one position in the air, suspended, just like a jewel or an emerald suspended in the air. And so, we each have a unique set of gifts, and the nature that we have, that we've been given, is something very valuable. It's the vehicle by which we can express ourselves in a unique way in the world. So it's something to be cherished and um, uh, protected, you can say. Krishna actually will explain that a person attains full perfection, he says, by devoting himself to his own particular work. In other words, our work can become, if it can become our daily yoga practice. And we're each born to perform a particular type of action. Our personal, you can say, dharma, our personal vocation is an inherent feature of the way that we've been constructed by the divine. So Krishna explains that by living that personal dharma or purpose, we can what we do can become an act of worship. Imagine that, right? What a different approach that is. Our daily work can actually become an act of worship. And so Krishna will explain how, and he offers 3 steps. The first step is be true to your nature. The second step is let go of the fruits. Let go of the outcome. Now, when I first came across this teaching, so Krishna says you have a claim only to the action itself, never to its fruits. Karmanyeva dhikaraste ma paleshu kadachana. You have a claim to the action, but never to its fruits. So this is the second step. When I first came across these teachings of Krishna on karma yoga, they stopped me dead in my tracks. And so I knew what it's like to act with attachment to the results. But how do you put all of your heart into something and at the same time let go of the outcome? Is it even possible? How do we apply this in practically in our daily life? So actually, when we are overly attached to the outcome, when we're anxious about the results, we experience suffering, right? We become very controlling, overpowering. We feel anxiety. So it's better to act with presence and put our heart into what we do and find satisfaction in the action itself. Let the action as an expression of devotion be its own reward. So letting go of the fruits doesn't mean we don't care about the results. Rather, it means acting with full commitment, but understanding that the results of action lie outside our control. Right? We never really know how things are going to turn out. It's a little bit like, Arjuna's a warrior, so he's an archer. So let's use the analogy of a bow and arrow. So if you have a bow and an arrow, right, you attach your arrow to the bow and you take aim, you need to try to hit the target. But once you've released the arrow, what more can you do, right? Once the arrow leaves the bow, then you let go of the outcome. You can learn from the outcome, but you let go of the outcome. This is what Krishna's teaching here. And in fact, letting go of the fruits means giving up our attachment that something has to happen in a particular way. We remain open to whatever the results are. So we free ourselves from the illusory ego's need to claim success for what we do, and also from the ego's fear of failure. And that actually brings out the best in us. We're much less likely to suffer crippling disappointment if things don't go exactly as we'd hoped or planned. But if we're fixated on trying to force an outcome, it brings all the unskillful ways of acting. It brings them out. So our illusory ego flourishes, and we are caught up in this cycle of want and frustration tied to our story. So I want to speak a little bit about, or share with you, how monkeys in India are captured. And this speaks to the title of this particular episode, Karma Yoga, 3 Easy Steps to Train the Monkey Mind. So how are monkeys captured in India? Sometimes in a village or a town, there's become so many monkeys, and what they sometimes do is they capture them and take them to the jungle or the forest further away, and at some distance away from the town or the village, and release them. So how do they do that? What they do is they take either a coconut or a bottle, and they attach it to a tree or a fence. And the mouth of this bottle is just large enough for a monkey's hand to fit inside. And then in the bottle, they put a banana. And this bottle is tied. So it's tied to a fence or a post or a tree. And then sure enough, a monkey comes along, spots the banana, and puts its little hand into the bottle and grabs hold of that banana. Now, once the monkey grabs hold of the banana, that fist with the banana is too large for the monkey to pull his hand out at that point. But by then, the monkey is so attached to that particular banana that it stays there trying and trying to remove that banana. It doesn't think to let go of it and pull its hand out. Right to the point that someone the villager will have a cloth bag and bag the monkey and capture it. So, we might think, well, that's a monkey, monkeys are not the brightest, and they can't figure out that they need to release the banana. But as humans, we're actually not always that different. We're like this also. Our bananas are our projections of what our life should look like. So I should have a bigger house, a nicer house by now. So I won't appreciate the beautiful home I'm in already. Or my partner doesn't fulfill the checklist of criteria I have set for a life partner. So I won't give this relationship the attention and care it deserves. So rather than focus on everything that's right about the relationship, I'll focus on everything that's wrong with it. Or why am I not earning as much as my friends? I'll make sure not to be grateful for what I do have by being resentful and angry about what I don't have. I should have achieved a lot more at my age, so I'll live in a state of restlessness and dissatisfaction with my life. The list of bananas goes on and on. But in the end, it's all just self-inflicted suffering. It's all just bananas. So Krishna's second teaching of Karma Yoga is let go of the fruits. That takes us to the third teaching, make your work an offering. We won't cover that today. It's very important. It's an essential step of karma yoga. Make your work an offering. And we'll cover that in the next session. And just to remind you, the date of the next session in which we'll be covering that, it is, if I remember correctly, that will be on, is it the, oh, I can't remember now. Let me take a look. When will that be? It'll be a little bit later this month, but I can't. It'll be next Monday, right? So next Monday, same time, we will continue this discussion. We'll have a look at the first two steps in a little further detail, and we'll focus especially on the third step, which is make your work an offering. Now, in karma yoga, the first two steps are very important. Sometimes we tend to rush to the third step and skip the first two steps. But the first two steps are very important. So this second step that we've just looked at is let go of the fruits. Very difficult to make, or it becomes, let me put it this way, it becomes much easier to make what we do an offering when we've already let go of the fruits. So these three steps follow naturally from each other and allow us to make our everyday work, what we spend so much of our day on, to make that part of our yoga practice so that we don't live a divided life. We may have our spiritual practice, or if we practice yoga, our yoga practice, we might do that in the morning, but then we have a split, a divided life where we go out to work and we do what we see as being unconnected to our practice, our spiritual practice or our yoga practice. And so we have a fractured life. But this, what Krishna's teaching here, is called continuous practice. So it's practice that's not limited to one location or a specific window of time, but we practice yoga on the field of action. Everything becomes part of our yoga practice. Thank you so much for joining us today, and very much looking forward to connecting with you next week, where we'll continue our discussion of karma yoga.
Thank you, Simon, for this wonderful episode, which is leaving us with a lot of self reflection and a really good activity to do. It could be at the end of the week, on a weekend, like on a Sunday afternoon or evening, to reflect about what we did great, what could be done better, what was skillful or unskillful, and
Right.
try to turn it into something positive, not just self reflection, but what can we do when we begin in our next week? So this is an excellent food of thoughts. Thank you, everybody who went and came in here live. Thank you so much. I will see you again this Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hare Krishna.